Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on downsizing with confidence. So I'm Julia, and I'm here at the Keller Williams office, and I'll be moderating our discussion today. And then we also have our panel of experts here. So I'm just going to pull up our slide over here, and we will introduce everyone.
I'll go ahead and jump in first.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm Shannon Jones with the Shannon Jones Team at Keller Williams Realty. And I specialize in residential real estate in Long Beach and surrounding Los Angeles and Orange County areas. So I've been doing this for 22 years. We have a team. Julia is actually our marketing manager on our team. And then we have my husband, who's my business partner, Kelly Handy, our operations manager, Shalise Kendrick, who's a buyer specialist on our team, and a couple other members as well. I won't go into that, but we are seeing lots of people right now with this pandemic, especially looking at shifting plans. And right now, everything is different in terms of the way we sell homes and many things about life. And so I think a lot of what we do takes more planning and more preparation. And that's why we thought it might be helpful to have this webinar so that we could go over what are the things that you should do or might want to do ahead of time in the planning process to make the actual transition as smooth as possible. So that's a little bit about me and why we're doing this.
Perfect. All right, and next up we have Traci.
Hi, everybody. I'm Traci Stier. I'm a mortgage broker for 30 years. I work in Southern California, and I work with all stages of life. So first-time buyer to maybe move-up buyer. And then when you're ready to kind of start downsizing, getting ready for retirement, maybe reevaluating your retirement plan. So those are all the facets that we can help you with from a lending perspective, help you position so that you can achieve your objectives, so you can execute your plan. Loan guidelines are constantly changing, and what you think you may qualify for from a borrower standpoint, a lender might have a completely different take on it. So those are all things that you should discuss, plan well in advance of making any changes to income or hours or debt. So I'm here to contribute what I can today.
Perfect. Thank you. Then next up we have Kevin.
Hey, good afternoon. This is Kevin Kelly. I work at Orange Coast Title. I've worked in the title industry my whole adult life. I've never had any other grown-up job. So basically, ironically, with COVID, so much has changed. Title insurance has not. Our role is exactly as it was pre-COVID. We need to, if you're the buyer coming in, you must come in clean. Nothing that the seller had can be anything you have to deal with. What has changed is Prop 13 and all of the nuances under that umbrella. So I will be kind of mentioning that because it does play a role on downsizing. And I think it's a very timely topic right now. So we'll be covering Prop 19 that just went into effect, and we'll be chatting.
Perfect. All right, and then our last expert is Betsy.
Hi, I'm Betsy Yeh. My company is the Estate Sisters. So I do estate sales. Home management is really what I consider it. It's all aspects of organizing, downsizing, packing, moving, and also I work with an art appraiser. So if that's needed, that's something that we can also provide. So since COVID, I really have only been off probably about maybe 2.5 months because people are still moving and downsizing and changes are still happening. So we just take the precautions just as you guys do. So we have the guidelines that we follow. No one comes into a sale without a mask. I've had a lot of clients who needed help with just organizing or packing. So that's another thing that we do. So, we try to provide services to all the clients. I try to let people know that I'm there for them. So it's, for me, as an estate sale person, I have a different approach with my business because it's not necessarily just come in and what do you have to sell? I'm more interested in making a connection with my client, so I know exactly where they are, because it's a very emotional time for people, whether you've lived in a home for 10 years, 15 years, or most of my clients are 40 years. And so it's emotional for the client, it's emotional for their family. So for me, it's really important to be able to sit down and get a feel of where everybody is with everything, and then just move from there when they're comfortable with what they need to do. I've always, work in, from the beginning to the end with my clients, as much help and support that they need. So I do approach my business very differently, I would say, than other estate sale companies. Not that I'm comparing myself, but I'm just
No,
Anyway.
I love that. It's a great approach. Thank you. Okay, so I think after all of our introductions, we're going to move on to the meat of the presentation. And we're going to start with Shannon, who's going to talk about the basics of downsizing.
So before we actually get into this, I do
Sure.
want to say that some of the things that we're going over here actually apply to any transition. So whether you're thinking of downsizing or whether you find yourself at a crossroads where you need more space, some of the steps that you would take to evaluate your space needs and how you'll transition will cross over as well to downsizing or upsizing, or even making a lateral move to another area. But in general, usually people make moves because of big changes in their life. So they get married, they get divorced, they get older, they have children, the children leave the house, they get a new job, they get a promotion. All kinds of changes occur. In this case, as we're talking about downsizing, and you can see in the picture there, these are people who are not necessarily just starting out their adult careers. They're, winding down and thinking about wanting to move at some point into retirement and possibly simplifying life. At this point in life, a lot of times people have equity that they built up in a home if they've purchased it, and they might want to cash out on that equity. They might want maybe less upkeep with the home, or the possibility of lowering bills. And sometimes when people get to my age, they start thinking about maybe finding a home that will be more friendly to needs later in life. So perhaps going from a 2-story to a 1-story, or from something that has loads of garden to upkeep to something that's maybe easier to maintain. There's also an opportunity to potentially boost a retirement fund. If you have a home that served you well with a large family, and now you're an empty nester, and you've got all that equity in the home, and you were able to cash it out and maybe buy something that met your needs, what would that do for your retirement fund? Right now, at least, you still have the ability to be exempt from capital gains, up to 250,000 for an individual, up to 500,000 for a couple if it's your primary residence. And so that is an opportunity to take some of those funds and think about using them for something else. So how would you know if downsizing is right for you? one of the things that you'd notice is that maybe you might be ready for less space. Maybe there's rooms you don't go in anymore. That's a good sign that you don't need them. Have you been thinking about purchasing your next home? Is it that little plan that's moving along in the back of your mind? And are you happy about the prospect of downsizing, or do you feel kind of forced or pressured into it? Not everybody does downsize. I have a woman I've been talking to for several years who kept telling me, you know, call me in 6 months, call me in 6 months. And, you know, 6 months ago, she told me, call me in February. So I dutifully called her in February, and she told me, Shannon, I have just decided to age in place. And you know what? That's a perfectly good option. If you like where you're at and your space works for you, then you don't need any of this. But if this is resonating with you, then stay tuned. The thing to think about too is if you weren't going to live where you lived, where would you live next? Would it be in your same community? Would it be in another community? What would you be looking for in the house? What would you be looking for in the area or the neighborhood? And those are questions that you'll want to kind of ask yourself before exploring the next step. So there's a lot of questions that those of us on the panel can answer for you. These ones aren't them.
Sorry, really quick, Kevin, did you want to jump in for a sec?
Well, we're talking about downsizing, and I also want to kind of introduce the whole concept that many of us have lived where we live because it was an easy commute to our employer. We no longer have to do that. So it doesn't have to be age related. It could be the dynamic of your job has changed, and you can live wherever you want, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to throw that in.
Yeah.
No, totally. I think that's a really great point. And I think that there's a lot of people in industries right now where they've been working at home, and there's some people have already heard that their jobs are going to be transitioning on a permanent basis to be able to work remotely. And some people are hearing that they may be able to do that at least on a part-time basis. And so it's allowing people to really sort of re-envision where they will be. And so that last question may be something that still requires more thought as, you know, people's employment situations still play out, for sure.
Absolutely.
So the next slide, I think maybe let's have maybe have Betsy talk a little bit about how do you get started with maybe thinking about getting rid of some of your belongings? Because we did talk a little bit about where you want to move, but let's kind of think about if you wanted to get rid of some of your belongings, what's a good way to kind of get started with that?
Well, one of the first things I found is typically when I meet with a client is to ask if they do know where they're going. And most times a family member is working with them, and that's usually the best situation because they can help their parents. It's usually a parent that they're helping. And most times I found is that they want them to be near them. So we look at, okay, so what's the space look like? You know, it's clearly not 3,000 square feet. Is it 1,000 square feet? What can we move? In fact, I just met with somebody yesterday, a really lovely lady, and she just loves this chair, but she's going to take this other sofa and this other couch. And I said, why don't you just take the chair? You love it, right? And she's like, you're right. And so my thing always is with people is, you know, take what you love, take the things that make you feel that you're at home, the memories, you know, that are good memories, but the things that make you comfortable. Because when you're transitioning from a family home, there are lots of memories. And so it's important that you bring those things that remind you of those happier times, or just those memories of your family. And clearly we can't take everything, although I have had a number of clients who do try to do that. So, a couple of storage units later, which I have to say, I always really stress, let's not do the storage unit because it's a lot of money, which people don't realize. I've had, just as all of you have always, experienced people that just, didn't make the best decisions financially, didn't look in long term and say, I'm paying $200 now. A few years into a storage unit, you're paying $400, and if you do that times 12, right, $4,800 a year. And I've had to tell people that's what your retirement is. That's in case something happens to you health-wise, right? You want to be able to get a caregiver in there to help you and assist you. So, like as I mentioned, I really do get to know my clients because it's important for me that, because I've seen this so many times, that I just try to guide people into making maybe just a better decision than they would have. But to get started, it is always, are you moving in with someone? Is it a room? What's the space look like? And then of course, the natural transition would be, well, then we can only take so much furniture. And the thing with storage, I think what I have found is that by the time you keep something in storage for say a year, you could have bought it new. So that is something.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a really great point.
I can't tell you how many people have, grandma and aunties and everybody's furniture, and they're never going to look at it. They're never going to use it, and it gets ruined. So by the time I get there, it's, can you help me clean it out? But things are in such bad shape that it's really a loss on a lot of levels. So again, I try to stress with people that it's just stuff, and we all have a lot of stuff. So if you're going to take it, take the best stuff, take the stuff that really means something to you, and, make that part of your new home.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that's really great advice. I had been lugging around for decades, literally decades, a set of dishes that was my grandmother's china. And I'm telling you, it took a whole cabinet. Like we had plates of every size, bowls of every size, every serving dish imaginable.
Right.
And we were remodeling our kitchen, and I took it out and I said, I haven't used it literally in 25 years.
Right.
Why am I dedicating a whole cabinet to it?
Right. Absolutely. I mean,
I don't have it anymore. Woohoo.
Good.
But
well, one of the things in an estate sale, because a lot of people have a notion that, things change, or generationally change. I'm in this business, my children who are in their 20s have no idea what yard row is. They have no idea. I mean, I do have good china, but there's no way in the world they're ever going to go out and buy a set, right? So you have a generation that doesn't really appreciate what our parents appreciated, right? So not unless you use it, then, if you don't use it, don't keep it. I've had so many clients who literally have saved 3 or 4 sets of china and, furniture and just all of this stuff for their kids. And I look at them and I say, do your kids even want it? They're like, oh, I'm not really sure. And I'm like,
then ask.
Well, then you might want to get rid of it, because it's more a thing of, I get the sentimentality of it, but I also think that you need to learn how to just live in the moment and enjoy it, and enjoy those things now, not so concerned with what something you may be handing down to someone who then feels really guilty about getting rid of it. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that.
Yep.
Because it was grandma's, right? And,
absolutely.
And you're still not doing anything with it. And so then, it's just best to just pass it on to someone who may actually really appreciate it and use it, right?
So let's start okay, so you're going to make a transition. Where do you start? And I want to say that I think a really good place to start, first ask yourself the questions that we had on that first slide, and think about where do you want to be? And then my suggestion, and this is not just because I am a real estate agent, but I really, really do suggest sitting down with a real estate agent, ideally one who specializes in your current area, and start talking with them about a game plan and beginning the process of planning. And I have met with and talked to people a year, 2 years, 3 years plus before they were actually ready to make a transition. So if you're wondering, is it too early for me to call? It is not too early. If it's the right real estate agent. There are some agents who are like, you don't want to sell in the next 30 to 60 days? I don't have time for you. That's not your agent. Just call the next one, okay? But really, you want to start thinking about between now and when you're ready to make the transition, what are the things that you should do? Are there any things that would make sense to do to your home? Mostly the answer will be no, unless there's some significant deferred maintenance that's impacting the curb appeal. But in our current market, we're in such a hot seller's market that a lot of the improvements you might need to make in an ordinary market are probably no's. You probably don't need to make them. By the time you're ready to move, will we be in a more normal, balanced market? Maybe. But there's a lot of things that people do to their homes to fix them up for sale that they really ought not to spend the money on. And so before you start spending the money on that, actually find out if it's going to add more than you're thinking about spending, because that can really impact your bottom line. Also be thinking about what is the market like now where you are, and what is the market like where you plan to move. And so which part of the move do you have the most leverage with? Are you in the strongest position with? So if we move to the next slide, we're going to talk about.
Well, I think before we jump to the next slide, Kevin wanted to jump in for a minute.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what are your thoughts on people moving out of state? I love the thought. There's a lot of states that are more advantageous tax wise, but I also see so many people sell their house here, move, and then the winter comes and they want to come back and they can't afford to buy their house back. So do you suggest?
That's a great question. Well, it's interesting because we were, I just was on earlier today where one of the chief economists for CAR was talking about it. And last year was one of the highest years for home sellers actually moving out of California. And it was right at about 30%. And for the first time in 120 years of our census history in California, the population of California actually shrunk instead of growing. So we definitely are seeing a lot of people do exactly that and move out of state for various reasons. Cost of housing being probably the biggest reason, along with taxes, and among other things. So I hear all kinds of reasons. The biggest states where we're personally seeing people move from our area, Texas, Idaho, Arizona, New Mexico, and for some reason, Ohio, also a few in Florida, and Nevada. Nevada's always been a big one. But those are where we see a lot of people going. We've had some people move to Montana recently. And if you're going to go someplace like that gets really cold, I think you make a really good point, Kevin, which is, I would suggest if you're going someplace where the weather is not, we pay a weather premium in California because we have great weather. If you're going someplace where the weather is more extreme, go and visit at a time when it's at its most extreme before you actually sell your home here, and make sure you're okay with it. Make sure that the economic benefits that you're going to reap are not going to be soured by the weather that you're going to experience.
Perfect.
Yep.
So absolutely. I think that's a super good point.
As a California girl who lived in Massachusetts for 7 years, yeah, nobody told me just how cold it gets out there. And I'm back, so
And
learned my
welcome back.
lesson.
We're glad that you are back.
Yes.
So in this market, we are in a strong seller's market. If you follow the real estate market at all, you are aware that our inventory is really low. Our demand is really high. Homes are selling quickly with multiple offers, top dollar. And so it is easy to sell. It is harder to buy. And I want to say this again, I only specialize in real estate in Southern California. So I'm not an expert in real estate in other parts of the country. However, I'm on a lot of in a lot of mastermind groups and real estate forums with other agents from around the country. And pretty much it is universal that across the country right now, we are experiencing a seller's market with low inventory to varying degrees. And so if you are selling and buying, you're going to have an easy time selling and a harder time buying. So you're definitely, unless you're able to buy without selling, you're probably going to want to sell first and then buy. So how do you do that? I mean, like, you don't want to end up homeless, right? So you have different options. You can sell and then stay with a family member. You can sell and then do like a short-term rental. You could pick a place and do, you know, an Airbnb or VRBO, a short-term lease. You can negotiate your sale so that you have a 30 to 60 day rent back from your buyer. So you have a lot of different options if you are planning to sell or buy. So if the market is so imbalanced, why would you want to do this now? Well, because right now prices are really up. You do have the opportunity also potentially to go ahead and sell now. And then when you know, the market is a little bit more even, cooled down, you potentially could buy then. You want to just monitor though, because if you are planning to obtain a loan, it's obviously going to be better to do so when the rates are as low as they are right now. So does that segue us to Traci? No, this it takes us off to when is the best time, which I just talked about a little bit, but timing is key. And actually this does take us to Traci.
Yes, it does.
To look at is, when do you have the best purchasing power?
So the first line, decide if you want to retire first or buy your home before retirement. It's so important to run what if scenarios and different pro formas based on if I retire, what will be my future income? What might I qualify for from a loan standpoint? Because before you do anything is when you've got the most choice. So you want to calculate what's my best case outcome or my worst case outcome. If you buy your home before retiring, you at least presumably have that same job and income. And that's the next consideration that you're going to look at. Sometimes people say, well, you know, I'm 62 and I want to slow down my hours at work. And so my W-2 from last year, Traci, is a lot less than the previous year. And for a lender, that's a red flag. The reason it's a red flag is because they're supposed to be able to estimate what your future income will be. So if they see a declining income, who knows where it will be in 3 years? And sometimes they can't approve a loan that way. So again, you want to talk about all your options before you make big changes in you know, income or debt, or you know, you want to start buying some things associated with retirement. You want to be really careful that you discuss that with a lender because it all impacts choice. So let's say that you take Shannon's advice and you do sell your home first. And now you're thinking about, okay, I'm sitting on this pile of cash. Now I want to buy my next home. What are some of the choices that you need to start considering? Well, you could just like most buyers could go in and you could say, I want to buy this home and I want to put anywhere from 5 to 20% down. That's kind of, the norm. And then get a loan for the balance. Or you could say, Shannon said it's really competitive. I want to stand out. I'm sitting on this pile of cash. Maybe I could go in and say, hey, I want to be a cash buyer. And then after you take title to the home and you move in, you could apply for a cash out refinance. And we call that delayed financing. There are some restrictions and you have to pay attention to some of the rules in advance, which is another good reason that you want to make your plan. And then finally, sometimes people say, you know what, and more, if you're a little bit older, maybe not 62, but maybe if you're 75 or 85 and you say, I'm already paying a mortgage. I feel comfortable that I'm going to be stuck with this payment. And we can start talking about maybe reverse mortgage. For some people, if you put anywhere from 40 to 50% down payment on a purchase price of, let's say, 700,000, let's say you put 350 down, you could choose to make a payment just like a regular mortgage, or you could choose not to make any payment. It's all strategy. It depends on if you think you're going to stay there long term, or if it's your final, home and you plan for. And as Shannon said in the beginning, do you need to revisit your retirement balances and say, recalculate those? And are these going to last my lifetime? Now's a perfect opportunity to do that. You want to put all that expert advice from your accountant to your financial planner, to your real estate agent, to your lender, and consider all of it before you, as you're building your plan.
Great points. Yeah, definitely. And I think, one of the things I'll say about Traci that I really value, and if you're watching this, I would encourage you to reach out to her, is I call Traci the queen of spreadsheets. So she's really, really good at helping people compare and contrast different options. And it's really, really important to know all of your options so that you can choose the one that best matches your goals.
Absolutely. All right, Kevin, you're up.
All right. So kind of in keeping with what Shannon was mentioning, let's just start. I'm going to try to be as brief as I possibly can because, Senate bills are complicated. So the umbrella of Prop 13 covers lots of different sub propositions, but Prop 19, like anything that passes, there's an advantageous aspect of it, and then there's something we have to give away so that it winds up passing. Okay, so
or something that people didn't really necessarily know was included when they voted for it.
Ironically, you are correct. So what I want to do is, Julia, can you put up
the other one?
Yeah,
yes,
because I think it breaks it down. So Prop 19, the great part about Prop 19 is it's kind of a two-pronged situation. The first being kind of talking about our downsizing strategy, right? And in the past, those of us who purchased our home years and years ago have a tax basis based on what that was when we purchased our house. So let's just say it's $200,000. Our property taxes are based on $200,000. We've been paying that for 20 years. If you are 55, it is your primary residence. In the past, we have been able to, one time in our lives, transfer that tax basis to an equal or lesser property. That was the past. Now, and we had 2 years to do so. Okay. So over 55, primary residence, 2 years to do it. Those are all still in place, but they've now allowed prorations. And it's particularly advantageous in Southern California. Okay, we were kind of talking right before we went live about there's a lot of houses that cost $1 million that didn't always cost $1 million. Okay, so you may be downsizing in square footage, but your location may be better. And so the equal or lesser scenario didn't really work for everybody. Well, as of Prop 19 passing, the eligibility stays the same. Got to be over 55. It's got to be your primary residence. You still have 2 years, but you can do prorations upward. So let's give a scenario. We bought the house for 200K. We're selling it for $1 million, and we're buying another house for $1.2 million. Instead of being taxed on the $1.2 million, you will be taxed on the first $1 million at your existing 200,000 tax base. And then they'll prorate the tax rate on the additional 200,000. So the reality of that scenario is you're living in a $1.2 million house, paying tax bill on 400,000. That's as good as it's going to get in Southern California in general. And the great part, and I really like this it kind of segues to what Shannon was talking about, is sell your house. You still have 2 years. So you may be able to wait out this buyer frenzy situation that we're dealing with now, right? And I like that. And the other thing is you can do it 3 times in your life. So, it's not that final, oh my gosh, did I make the right decision? You can, if it isn't the right decision, then you do it again 3 times before you die. So
and I think we had a lot of people previously who were like, okay, I've got one shot at this. I better get it right.
Right.
What if you move someplace and find out it's not your forever home? Like you said, okay, move again.
Yep. And then the other portion, and I'm not going to go into it that much, is intergenerational wealth. We as the real estate industry was very, very pleased with this proration. We were all very excited. But they kind of snuck in that in the past, you could deed a property of any value directly as a gift to your child or grandchild. There are some caveats, but overall, very simple to do. Now it must be your primary resident and the child's primary residence, and it cannot be more than $1 million, which brings us back kind of to the topic of there's a lot of houses that are $1 million now. So, this wasn't as applicable. But again, as prices go up, there's always going to be some additional taxation. That's just how it works, right? So that's kind of the briefest overview. Obviously, we've got marketing pieces and explanations, and I would love, feel free. I have a lot of people, Shannon's clients call me directly all the time. I run through their scenario because everyone's a little different. Mm-hmm. And while these bills are designed for every Californian, we want to be sure that they're applicable to you and that it really makes sense to you. So that's kind of where I come in. You reach out and we do that. The good news is all of this is now throughout California. In the past, there were certain counties that opted in or out. That's not a deal anymore. You want to move from, LA to Mammoth, good for you. It's all good. So that's kind of the briefest overview.
I think Tracy, do you want to? Oh, sorry. I think Tracy wanted to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Kevin, is Prop 19 temporary or permanent? And did Prop 60 and 90 go away? They're retired?
Yep. Okay, so 19 is a composite of 60, 90, 58, and 128.
Okay.
It's now all 19.
Okay, thank you.
Makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Real quickly, if you are watching this on a replay and you are looking at this small print on your screen
Sorry.
and going, I can't read this, what I want to say is that we will be posting a replay of this on YouTube, and on YouTube there will be a link
Yes,
to
absolutely.
a blog post,
Thank
and
you,
we will have
guys.
all of this information available there. So if you're watching a replay and trying to read this on a tiny screen, yes, we will make it easy for you.
There
And
you
if for
go.
some reason you have a hard time finding that, then go ahead, you can send us an email, info@showmehome.com. You can give us a call at 562-896-2456, and we'll make sure that you get all of the information so you don't have to read it little, because if, like me, you need glasses, there's
can't
no
even
way
read
you're
it
gonna
from
do it
here.
without doing that.
Yes,
So,
I will link it, so don't worry
Yeah,
about
so we'll
that.
make sure you get that. So let's talk then about stuff. So you've decided you wanted to move, you sold your house, or you're thinking about selling your house, and you have all this stuff. We touched on it a little bit with Betsy, but let's really get into it. Really, how do you go through it, and what can you do with it?
Okay, so my typical client is someone whose parents have lived in the house anywhere between 40, 60 years, and they have never cleaned out a closet. So with that said, it's typically very overwhelming for the family at best. And typically halfway through it, they kind of throw their hands up and say, there's got to be somebody who can do this for us. So my first thing is always to meet the client or the client's family, and see exactly where we are with things. So the focus right off the bat is to look at all the sentimental things, all the photos, anything that you think that the family might want. They can come in. I always say schedule a day, kind of keep a timeline, give your family a deadline of as far as when they can come in to get things, because most times, 99% of the time, the family is trying to settle the estate. That's the objective. So we're always going to have family members who are going to pick something up but never do. And so it's kind of gets a little bit out of hand. And so I always say the best way to do it is to get out a calendar, send out a family email or whatever it may be, in order to communicate with everyone and let everyone know this is our this is what we're trying to achieve, and we're trying to achieve it within this certain, period of time. So, the first week of March, we'd like everybody to come down. If you can't come down, we can do the, phone thing and walk around the house. And if you want anything of grandma's or whatever it is, let us know, and we can, designate that as something that the family will want. So there's a lot of different ways that we can deal with that, but it's one of the quickest ways to get that done.
Hold on, Kevin, did you want to ask a question on that?
Well, I'm just thinking of my own scenarios, right? Do you suggest you put all of your photos digital? Just do it? Because I don't want to throw them away. Physically throwing them away seems very emotional to me.
Right,
but
right. Well,
once I got it digitally, I don't need them.
Right, exactly. And that's usually where people end up with it, or at least it's something to strive toward, because that can also be overwhelming. You open a closet. In fact, I just had a client, there's 40 photo albums.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
They're just looking at that, like, what are we going to do with that? So
really, logistically.
Right. It's
That's
and
a
those
lot.
photo albums weigh, they're a good 5-10 pounds each when you move them. So it usually takes somebody in the family who has the wherewithal to say, we'll just take one at a time, or we'll cull through this collection and see who wants to keep what. In fact, the one of the ideas that they had was to take the more personal family pictures, especially the pictures of ancestors. A lot of times it's really funny. Some families don't even know who those pictures belong to. Like, no one has any idea. Why do we have all these old photos? Nobody knows whose family they came from. And it's kind of comical. But but anyway, so what they did was they actually did have somebody in this family, one of the families that I just handled, and they're going to take pictures, scan all the pictures, and then they're going to make copies for everybody in the family. And so then they're going to, that's the gift. Right?
That's a labor of love.
Yeah.
And in that way, the family and your children, your grandchildren, they can say, hey, this is where you came from. Because I think it's really important, right? We have to know where we came from so we can continue on that story. And especially with the way, people, the next generation, they don't want a lot of stuff. Everything is sort of compact. So that's one way to really, to pass that along rather than throwing it in the trash can. And after that, then it's a matter of me coming in and going through everything, sorting through trash, seeing what is sellable, and what is donatable first, right out the door, and then setting everything up. So I stage everything on my websites. I do everything from, one person who has a garage who just literally like to just park their car one more time in the garage. So we've had those very funny.
Brad and I need you.
Yeah, it's very funny. It's very funny. It's like, I just want to park my car. Can you come over? I'm sure. So
I'm not actually joking though.
Yeah. And so a lot of those, and I do a lot of hoarder homes. And what I tell people, because hoarding is just a whole different ball of wax. And so typically the family's very embarrassed. And this isn't anything about me judging how anyone has lived, okay? This is about trying to help a family cope with the way their parents lived. And how did that happen is always a question that I get asked. And how did we not see this, right? Because then the family feels very guilty because they feel as if they've neglected their parent. And a lot of times the parent won't let the family know that they're actually living this way. And, we're all adults. And at some point in time, your kids really can't force you to live somewhere else, right? So that's always sort of a, family dynamic that I handle. But I actually really love my job. So for me, it's never too much for me. It's always, I can totally see the forest through the trees when I go to a home. And I think that I have been told this, that it's just a relief because they don't have to be overwhelmed. They don't have to feel guilty. They don't have to, just, try to face this head on where they can't. I just had a sale about a month ago, and she was so embarrassed she wouldn't even go in the house with me. She just said, just go in and look. And I said, okay. And she was just ready to just get a dumpster, hire me, and throw everything away. And I said, no, this is she was so shocked. She said, this is a really clean hoarder home. Okay, so there's all different levels. Okay, I found the dead animals, and I'm just waiting for the body one of these days. Okay, but it's always sort of a challenge for me. So and her mother was a ceramicist, and was just really creative. And so I said, no, there's plenty in here. She had a beautiful garden. I said, there's plenty in here for us to come in and clear everything out and then separate what we can sell. And, I charge separately for a hoarder home. It's a completely different package in a sense. And then the estate sale, we had the estate sale. So at the end of it, she was so pleased because people literally came for her mother's pottery because it was just really done, beautifully done. I'm a total ceramic person, so I got it. And then plants always are a big seller. But at the end of the day, she was so pleased because we didn't throw anything in the trash that wasn't trash. We actually were able to sell enough to offset all the costs of labor and everything else and clear the entire house out within a week. So,
wow.
That to me, and that's the part of my job that I really love, is being able to make someone feel really good about their parents and, what they contributed. And I think that I had elderly parents, and I think it's just really important that we remember, right, that you want to do the right thing, and I am this involved with my clients, I hate to tell you, but, I was really close to my parents, so it was really important to me that I, when I took care of them and that I treated them with respect. And I will tell you, and I'm sure you guys have all experienced this, is when you're speaking to a client, they sometimes forget that the parent is sitting in the room. And I just find that mind-blowing, okay? And when I'm in that position, I actually turn all my attention to that person because they're still in charge. And I think when I get older, I don't want to be treated that way, right? So you don't want anyone, your children, especially, making decisions for you. And that's what I have to tell people sometimes, this is your mother's life. This is your father's life. This is important that we treat them with respect. And
it's their stuff too. And I think one of the things, like to me, it makes me sad to think about somebody just like taking everything and throwing it in a dumpster when there's, beautiful pieces that maybe her mother had created that would bring joy to someone, and help pay to handle the other things that weren't going to bring joy to anyone. But it's, it's much greener to find uses for some of these other things with people who would love them.
And that's the important part too, is that I have contacts, a lot of resources with local community outreach programs, Beacon House, which is for, men's rehabilitation centers. So I actually take the time to keep things out of the landfill. I was kind of raised that way. So it's about reusing and repurposing. There's always somebody who can use a table. There's always somebody who can use, dishware. So rather than throw it all away or donate it to a nonprofit that charges just a little too much, I would rather just directly hand it off to somebody so that person is able to get on with their life. And that to me is very, it's actually very fulfilling for me that you're able to help somebody kind of get back on their feet and, have a bed to sleep on. And, what I always say is, we take for granted that we have a plate and, a saucer and forks and, that kind of thing. But if you can all remember when you first moved out, I opened my kitchen cabinets and wondered where everything was because, my mother didn't go out and buy it. Okay.
Right.
So,
Yes.
It's those things that we kind of take for granted, but then when you see that someone else doesn't have it, gives you a different perspective, right?
Absolutely. So
Yes.
wonderful. Well, does anybody have any questions or anything else that they want to add?
I do.
Yeah.
I would think that a lot of people don't even want to talk to Shannon because they might be overwhelmed by the prospect of emptying their home. And it's such a personal experience to open your door and allow someone like Betsy in. Just your demeanor, Betsy, and the fact that you say that, no judgment and that you love what you do, that would, I think that would shine through. And I think personally for me, I wouldn't want to move because I think I can't do this by myself and I don't feel trusting enough to let somebody in. So an introduction to you early on could maybe help that.
Yeah. Well, the other thing for me is that, and I'm sure you guys have this too, is that you really don't want to push. You want to give people that latitude that they need, their own comfort zone. I always tell people when I'm always happy to go out and meet a client. And I, look, you have to be comfortable with me. You don't know me. Okay. So I give them resources. So estatesales.net is a national database and it's family owned. And I always refer my clients to this. I say, you can go on there and look, they've got this huge FAQ. And so some of the things that you're going to ask me, you need to ask me those questions because you need to feel comfortable with who I am and what I'm doing. And, I've heard a couple of things from a client just recently that were really mind-blowing to me. You guys will appreciate this, that there is an estate sale company that's asking people to change all the locks to a house. And I had a client call me from up north. They had moved up north and they said, does that sound right? And I said, are you out of your mind? I said, no, that's got to be the most horrifying thing I've ever heard. You don't ever change your locks for anybody. I mean, they could say you've now turned over ownership, correct? So really scary stuff that people are saying in, saying that they're an estate sale company, but yet they're doing all these crazy things. Well, the other one that I heard was that this company needs a month to set up their sale, and they need to live in your home. And I said,
Oh my gosh.
wow. Wow. I mean, is that crazy?
Yeah, that's an interesting scam, isn't it?
Yeah, no kidding. And I
Oh
said,
my.
gee whiz, that would be like squatting. I mean, how are you ever going to get them out, right? And moreover, what in the world are you doing for a month? I mean, I do 2 sales a week. So, I'm a super candid person. I'm like, wait, whoa, something's wrong there. You got to rethink that one. I would never, ever. First, I don't even want to stay in somebody else's house. That's number one. Okay.
No.
I never press anybody for a key. If you want to meet me every single time we come over here to set up and have the sale, you do what's comfortable. I'm not interested in your stuff. Okay. I'm interested in doing a good job, getting this done for you so you can move on. That's my only agenda. So I really advise people to always ask all these questions so they are comfortable, so they don't get into these situations where people don't know what they're doing, or they're pulling, some kind of con, and it's terrible. So
I think that's a really, really good point though, Betsy, that I think as people look at their options and they review their plan and they sort through who it is they want to work with, in any of our capacities, it is important to ask a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what, if you don't feel comfortable with the person that you are talking to, then you shouldn't be working with them.
Right.
And I get so many emails, inquiries from our website every week from people who have entered contractual relationships with other real estate agents who are having a hard time getting information, who aren't hearing back from their real estate agent, and who don't know what to do.
Right.
And it makes me very sad that they are in a relationship where they're not getting the help and the guidance and the communication that they deserve and that they need to move forward with the process. Unfortunately, there's not much I can do, because when somebody is represented by another real estate agent, it's actually a violation of the real estate code of ethics for me to provide them with advice. So by the time they've signed something, it's completely out of my hands.
Let me ask you something I'm curious about. So you enter into an agreement, but isn't there a term on the agreement to where if you have an end date to that? So
there is, but the questions I usually get are when people are under contract and there's a problem with the contract.
Oh, okay.
So they've listed their home, they're selling their home, and now there's an issue. There's an issue with the contingencies. There's an issue with the other party not performing. There's an issue with their agent not explaining things to them or getting them back. So it's usually at the point in time when they're actually now in the process of selling their home and something's gone wrong.
Right.
And what I will say is that some people think that, well, in a seller's market, it really doesn't matter who you hire because we could just put up a sign and sell the house.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
But can you sell it for top dollar?
Right.
Can you actually negotiate a contract that gets you not only the best price, but also the best terms? Are you hiring somebody who's going to anticipate the problems that could come up and do come up during the transaction and help you solve them? Those are why you actually need to hire somebody who knows what they're doing.
Right.
So.
Well,
that's my 2 cents. I'll get off my soapbox.
Sometimes until you're right in the thick of it, right?
Exactly.
Because everybody, has a tendency to say, they do know what they're doing, and they're of course going to promise you the world, and then you don't perform, but then you're already in the midst of all of that, and like you say, I mean, there's almost no recourse to it.
Yeah. So ask questions, read reviews online. Ask for references. Those are all things that you can do. And anybody who is reputable and experienced is
Mhm.
not going to have a problem with you asking for references.
They want you to ask for them.
Absolutely. And if they have a problem with it, that's probably not your person.
Right.
So call someone else.
Yeah.
And on that note, I just want to say that whether you're watching this on YouTube or on our Show Me Home blog post or anything, I will link the information for all of these experts here somewhere. So look for that in the description or below this video. So if you need to reach out to any of them personally, you will have all those options.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks
you
for
guys
having me,
so
guys.
much for
Thank
joining
you,
us.
everyone.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
absolutely. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Good
Take
day.
care.